They told her there were no rooms left. Not for her, not tonight, not even when her name was engraved on the plaque behind the front desk. Before we begin, drop a comment. If you've ever been underestimated, then stay with me. Because this story isn't just about a hotel room. It's about identity, quiet power, and what happens when you're forced to prove who you've been all along. A soft clatter of suitcase wheels and hushed conversations filled the marble lobby of the Oakmark Grand Hotel in Des Moines, Iowa. It was nearly 10 p.m., and the evening calm had settled in like a velvet blanket. A woman stepped through the revolving doors, unassuming but unmistakably composed. Vanessa Claiborne, 48 years old, CEO, founder, builder of empires. No entourage, no suitcases stacked high, no name-dropping. Just a simple canvas duffel slung over her shoulder, comfortable loafers, and a dusty blue blouse that whispered authority instead of shouting it. The receptionist glanced up without recognition, her acrylic nails clicking lazily on the keyboard as she offered a tired smile. Checking in. Yes, Vanessa said with quiet grace. Under Claiborne. Vanessa. A pause. The girl typed, her brows knitting together. I don't see anything under that name. There should be a suite always held under the owner block. The receptionist's tone stiffened. Ma'am, we're actually full tonight. You'd need a confirmed reservation. Guests only. Vanessa's expression didn't falter, but a shift occurred like the moment right before a thunderclap. She looked past the receptionist to the gold-trimmed plaque bolted into the marble wall. Oakmark Grand Claiborne property. I am a guest, she said gently. And more than that, I own this hotel. The girl blinked, momentarily stunned, then gave a small, almost amused smirk. You own the Oakmark, Vanessa nodded. The smirk stayed. I'm going to have to call the manager. Go ahead, Vanessa replied, calm as ever. Across the lobby, a couple in golf polos glanced over. A man near the fireplace tilted his head. She could feel it. The air thickened, not with fear, no, with presumption, the kind that said, we think we know who's lying. And it's not us. Moments later, a thin man with a crooked tie emerged, clipboard in hand. Assistant manager Neil Dorrance. He looked at her, blinked, and put on a mask of rehearsed cheer. Good evening. Is there a problem with your reservation? She claims to own the hotel. The receptionist said, too loud, too certain. I don't claim, Vanessa said evenly. I do. My name is Vanessa Claiborne. You'll find it on every quarterly report and executive memo. I'm here for one night. My suite should be ready. Neil hesitated. Just a moment, please, he mumbled, already turning toward the back hallway with a walkie pressed to his mouth. Vanessa stood perfectly still near a marble pillar, untouched by the tension buzzing around her. She didn't fidget. She didn't raise her voice. But the pressure in the room grew heavier. Then, like clockwork, security arrived. Not aggressive, just present. One posted by the elevator, another lingering near the coffee bar. This wasn't about a misunderstanding. It never was. She could have flashed her ID, pulled up ownership documents, photos from ribbon cuttings. Instead, Vanessa pulled out her phone, stepped back, and made a single call. Calm, direct, no explanation, no anger. This is Vanessa Claiborne. I've just been denied access to my own property. Resolve it. Immediately. The call lasted 26 seconds. She slipped her phone into her coat pocket and waited. Still. Unapologetic. Undefeated. Neil hadn't returned. The receptionist kept typing, not because she was doing anything useful, but as if the act alone could make her look occupied, innocent, right. Her eyes flicked up, now and then, increasingly uneasy. The uniformed guard by the elevator shifted his stance. Behind Vanessa, she could feel eyes on her, the couple in polos now openly whispering, a teenager near the fireplace, peeking over his laptop, pretending not to stare. The same story. Different city. Different night. Vanessa didn't move from her place near the marble pillar. The call had already been made. Now came the part where people began to realize they were no longer in control of the room. A few minutes later, Neil returned, clipboard in hand, sweat forming along his brow despite the comfortably cool air. Miss Claiborne, he began, voice overly crisp, too forced. He emphasized the last name now. I think there's been a mix-up. We just need to verify. You can verify all you want, Vanessa said gently, but I'm not going anywhere. Neil froze for half a second, then glanced past her to the security guard, silently asking for help without words. The guard didn't budge. A standoff had begun, not loud, not violent, but unmistakably tense. Vanessa noticed the receptionist now subtly checking her phone under the desk. Fingers scrolling, swiping, probably typing Vanessa Claiborne into Google. Probably thinking this was some prank, some bluff. Probably expecting to find nothing. It would have been funny if it weren't so depressingly familiar, because this happened all the time. People thought they knew what power looked like, what ownership sounded like, what success was supposed to wear. And she didn't fit that picture. Brown skin, natural hair tied into a practical puff, no designer purse, no diamond earrings, no flashy watch. Just presence quiet, deliberate, undeniable. But they didn't see that. They just saw a woman who didn't belong. And that was the sting, not the rejection, but how unsurprising it was. Vanessa remembered another hotel lobby 20 years ago in Milwaukee. She was 28, just promoted to VP, wearing heels that gave her blisters and a boxy suit from a clearance rack. Security followed her from the door to the elevator. The only thing that saved her was the CFO arriving to greet her in person. Otherwise, they would have made her leave. She had never forgotten. And tonight, 2 decades and 17 properties later, she was still standing in a lobby under her own name, being asked to prove she belonged. She scanned the room, her eyes calm, but her soul sparking with fire. No apology had come. No one had tried to fix it. Only silence. Only watching. Only doubt. Then finally the elevator dinged. 2 men stepped out, one in a crisp grey suit, the other in a corporate fleece. They didn't look like hotel staff. They moved too quickly, too purposefully. Vanessa recognized them before they even spoke. Regional VP Brent Kessler, District Manager Carlos Reno. Now it was their faces that betrayed panic. Brent moved fast, nodding at Neil without breaking stride. "Miss Claiborne, we are so sorry. I just got the call." Carlos followed, breathless. "We're taking care of this, right now." Neil opened his mouth to speak, but Brent shot him a warning look that made him shut it just as fast. The receptionist went pale. The pieces were falling into place, too late to matter. Carlos tapped his tablet. "Suite 1202 is being cleared right now. Your driver's being rerouted for tomorrow. Your usual fruit tray and espresso setup will be in the room within the hour." Vanessa gave a faint, unreadable smile. "Thank you." But she didn't move. She wanted to see it, all of it. The shift, the tone, the fear. The unraveling of assumptions. She wanted to watch them learn. Because it's one thing to make a mistake out of ignorance. It's something else to hold on to it when the truth is right in front of you. Carlos leaned in toward Neil, voice low, but laced with urgency, delivering instructions that didn't require volume to land like thunder. Brent was already dialing, his voice clipped, precise, unmistakably reporting to someone higher up, HR, legal, maybe both. The receptionist, Kayla, her name tag now visible, stood frozen. Her manicured nails, once tapping with lazy rhythm, now trembled against the desk. Her mouth parted slightly, as if a word had formed, but none came out. Vanessa remained still, her presence more commanding in silence than most could ever be with sound. She didn't gloat, she didn't sneer, she didn't lean into her victory like a sword. She simply walked slow and purposeful toward the front desk and placed her phone gently on the counter. "I'll take the 12th floor suite," she said evenly. "Same setup. Please send someone up to confirm it's been cleaned properly." Kayla nodded, her movements robotic. Her voice failed her entirely. Vanessa turned to Brent. "Have I been checked in?" Brent flipped the clipboard. "Just finished. 2 key cards and an incident report will be delivered by the time you reach the elevator." "Good. And the rest?" He straightened. "A site-wide notification has been issued. Corporate audit team is on standby. All current staff are required to undergo immediate recertification in guest protocol. Disciplinary actions start tonight." Vanessa's eyes flicked once to Kayla, who was now biting the inside of her cheek, struggling to hold her composure. "You'll speak to her," Vanessa said. Brent cleared his throat. "Yes, ma'am. Privately with HR present." "I'll speak to her too," Vanessa added. "Not now. After I've rested." There was no threat in her voice, only clarity. Only choice. She took the key cards, nodded once, then turned toward the elevator. The crowd parted. Heads turned, conversations muted. but no one dared approach. As the elevator doors closed behind her, Vanessa caught a final glance of Neil standing stiffly at the front desk, sweat still clinging to his temple. His clipboard no longer a shield, just paper. The elevator rose, and the higher it climbed, the more her heartbeat settled, not from relief, but from something more sacred. Resolution. The suite on the 12th floor smelled faintly of lemon and eucalyptus. The fruit tray was already on the coffee table, perfectly chilled, garnished with mint. Espresso pods stacked beside a polished machine. A card lay folded neatly with her initials clearly written in a rush, but it was there. She didn't tear it open. She didn't need to. She walked the room like someone inspecting, not just for cleanliness, but for energy, for signs that someone still cared. That someone somewhere remembered this was more than a business. This was her story. She traced her hand along the edge of the marble desk, remembering a time when none of this seemed possible. She was 33 when she pitched this hotel to a skeptical bank in Minnesota. They had laughed, or worse, patronized, offered predatory terms, dared her to succeed. And she had. 17 hotels later, and still on nights like this, she had to remind people of what she built. Her phone buzzed. A message from her assistant, everything in motion. Let me know if you want a media statement. Vanessa stared at the screen. She could have made it public. One tweet, one interview, and the story would spread like wildfire. But tonight wasn't about virality. This wasn't rage. This wasn't revenge. This was about respect, the kind you shouldn't have to earn twice, and never through humiliation. She sat on the edge of the bed, folded her hands, and let the silence hold her. Outside, the city still moved, cars humming down Grand Avenue, a freight train groaning somewhere in the industrial dark. But inside this room, it was quiet. Not empty. Not lonely. Just quiet enough for her to feel every breath of what had happened, and what was coming next. A soft knock broke the stillness. Vanessa rose and opened the door to find a young man in a hotel vest, nervously holding a silver tray with a fresh espresso, a folded note, and a single orchid in a narrow glass. Compliments of the kitchen manager, he said, voice just above a whisper. And there's an offer for an in-room massage on the house. She accepted the tray with a nod. Thank you. The door closed gently behind him. Vanessa placed the espresso on the table, unfolded the note. A quick scribbled apology from the chef. It wasn't necessary, but it was honest. And right now, that counted for something. She sat again, sipping slowly, letting the heat of the coffee match the warmth rising quietly within her. Not anger, not pride, something steadier. She glanced at the window. The city shimmered in the distance, lights blinking like restless thoughts. And somewhere between the tension and the silence, she could feel a shift not just in the hotel, but in herself. At precisely 6:30 a.m., Vanessa stepped out of the elevator, no longer dressed for rest. She was the CEO now in full view. Her charcoal suit was perfectly tailored, paired with a sharp ivory blouse and heels that clicked like punctuation marks across the marble floor. Her eyes focused, her stride unbothered. The lobby stirred with the soft chaos of early checkouts and sleepy travelers. Conversations paused. Even the barista behind the kiosk stopped mid-pour as Vanessa passed. Brent and Carlos were already standing by the fireplace, each holding a folder, 2 cups of untouched coffee sitting between them. Neither man looked like he had slept. She offered a single nod, and together they walked toward a small executive conference room tucked just past the concierge desk. Inside, seated and stiff, were assistant manager Neil, receptionist Kayla, and a third woman with a corporate badge clipped to her lapel, Marta from HR. Vanessa didn't sit. She stood at the head of the table, arms folded. Silence blanketed the room, thick, deliberate. Then, in a voice barely louder than a whisper, she asked, "Would someone like to explain what happened last night from your perspective?" Kayla looked down instantly. Neil opened his mouth, but nothing came out. He cleared his throat, a sound that evaporated into more silence. Vanessa waited. Finally, Kayla spoke. Her voice was brittle. I didn't expect. You didn't expect someone like me to own the building," Vanessa said, finishing the sentence for her, calmly, precisely. Kayla's cheeks burned red. She gave a barely perceptible nod. Was I rude to you? Vanessa asked. Kayla shook her head. No, ma'am. Did I raise my voice? No. Did I threaten anyone? A whisper now. No. Vanessa exhaled slowly and turned toward Marta. I don't want this to be a firing squad, but I do need accountability. Marta nodded firm but neutral. Understood. Carlos spoke up next. We're issuing a formal write-up. Kayla will be removed from front desk rotation until recertification is completed. Neil is placed on administrative review pending additional interviews. Vanessa nodded, then turned her gaze back to Kayla. How long have you worked here? Kayla's voice was small. 4 months. And in that time, how often have you thought about who built this hotel, who it belongs to? Kayla hesitated. I guess I just assumed it was some corporation. Investors, a board or something. Vanessa let the pause stretch. I've built 17 properties across this country, she said finally, from Baltimore to Phoenix. Every one of them designed with intention. With access, with humanity. She stepped closer, her voice dipping. I built this brand because I was tired of being treated like a shadow. Her eyes locked on Kayla. So tell me why after all that I still walk into a lobby with my name on the deed and I am invisible to the people working under it. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. The question wasn't just for Kayla, it was for all of them, for everyone who ever thought power had to look like something it didn't. The room stayed still. No one reached for their coffee. No one dared shuffle their papers. Even Marta, poised and corporate calm, didn't interrupt the silence Vanessa had just laid bare. Carlos cleared his throat. We've drafted a memo, he said, his voice steady but cautious. It goes out to every Claiborne property by noon. Mandatory inclusivity and empathy training. Company-wide, no exceptions. Vanessa turned toward him, her gaze sharp but not cruel. Make sure it's not just another box to check. Carlos nodded quickly. Understood. I don't want scripts, she said. I want comprehension. I want awareness. I want respect when no one's watching. Brent finally spoke. We'll make it real. She looked at him for a moment, then gave a single nod. The meeting was over. Vanessa walked out of the room without waiting for fanfare or deference. She didn't want performance. She wanted culture to shift, and she'd know soon enough whether it had. The lobby felt different now. More alert, more careful, staff straightened when they caught sight of her. Some nodded respectfully, some whispered as she passed, but she didn't acknowledge any of it, not out of arrogance, but intention. This wasn't about her ego, this was about watching whether transformation had any legs. But before she could leave the hotel, there was still one more conversation she needed to have. And it had nothing to do with policy. She waited. Gave it time, let the morning rush thin out, no distractions, no guests to smile for, no phones ringing to mask discomfort. And when the moment was right, she found Kayla again. The young woman was in the staff lounge behind the coffee bar, alone. A half-eaten blueberry muffin sat on a napkin beside her. Her phone was face down, her eyes were puffy from lack of sleep and from more than that. Vanessa didn't send someone to call her, she walked in herself. Kayla sat up fast, nearly knocking over her paper cup. Relax, Vanessa said softly, pulling out the chair across from her. I just want to talk. Kayla swallowed hard. Yes, ma'am. Drop the ma'am. This isn't a hearing. Kayla nodded, eyes fixed on the table. They sat for a long moment. The soft hum of the fridge filled the room. Fluorescent lights buzzed faintly overhead. Then Vanessa spoke. Have you ever worked in a place where you felt small? Kayla blinked. Looked up. Yeah, most of the time. Tell me. Kayla hesitated, then shrugged, her voice raw. I worked at a diner out by I-80 for about a year. Wore this paper hat. Got yelled at by the cooks every shift. Customers called me kid, even though I was 27. I felt invisible. Every single day. Vanessa leaned back. So you know what that feels like? Kayla nodded. Yes, then help me understand, Vanessa said gently, how you looked me in the eye last night and decided I didn't belong. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of guilt, of memory, of the kind of clarity that doesn't come from being yelled at, but from being asked to reflect. I don't know, Kayla said, barely above a whisper. I didn't mean to. When you walked in, I thought maybe you were waiting on someone, or maybe lost. You didn't look like... She caught herself. Didn't look like what Vanessa asked voice even. Kayla shook her head, ashamed, like someone who owns hotels. Vanessa didn't flinch. She'd heard it before, felt it in rooms before this one ever existed. And what does that person look like? Kayla didn't answer. That's the real problem, Vanessa said. People have a picture in their heads. Clean cut, probably older, probably male. Definitely not me. That picture isn't just in your mind, it affects how you treat people, what you assume, what you allow. I'm sorry, Kayla said, tears now lining her eyes. I know that's not enough, but I am. Vanessa nodded once. It's a start, but I didn't come here for an apology. I came because I wanted you to see me. Kayla frowned, slightly confused. Not as your boss, not as a warning, as a person. She leaned in slightly. I was you once. Kayla's eyes widened. You? Really? Vanessa smiled gently. My first job was as a receptionist in St. Paul. I used to answer phones in a lobby smaller than this staff room, wore second-hand blazers, shoes that blistered my feet, and makeup I had to borrow. People mistook me for the janitor, or the intern, or worse, ignored me entirely. Kayla leaned forward, unconsciously pulled in, not by power, but by the story. The humanity. One time, Vanessa continued, a guest walked in, took one look at me and asked, "Can I speak to someone who works here?" I was wearing a name badge, a headset. I had the schedule in my hand. Kayla winced. That's awful. Vanessa nodded. It's familiar, and every time it happened, I had to make a decision, fight back or let it pass. But when I finally got into the boardroom, I told myself I'd build places where people like you could grow, where no one had to feel like they didn't count. Kayla blinked quickly, trying to stop the sting behind her eyes. I didn't know. I guess I never thought someone like you could understand. I understand more than you think, Vanessa said. But here's the thing, understanding isn't enough. Awareness has to lead to change. She stood slowly, calm and composed. I don't need you to be perfect, but I do need you to be aware. Every guest who walks through those doors, whether they're wearing a business suit or sweatpants, deserves the same respect. Kayla stood too. Thank you for talking to me. I mean that. Vanessa gave a quiet nod, then turned and left. But as she stepped through the lounge door, something shifted, not in the building, but inside her. A tension she didn't know she was still carrying finally began to lift, because the message had landed, not with an audience, not with applause, but where it mattered most. By mid-morning, the rhythm of the Oakmark Grand had returned, at least on the surface. Guests rolled luggage across the lobby. The barista poured lattes. A family asked about the local zoo. But inside the management office, something was different. Brent stood by the window, arms crossed, watching the valet cycle cars outside. Carlos typed steadily at his laptop, reviewing training protocols. Marta, the HR lead, scribbled notes on onboarding reforms. And in the center of it all, Vanessa sat with a fresh stack of evaluations. She wasn't angry. She was focused. I'm not here to punish, she said aloud, scanning a report. I'm here to prevent repetition. Carlos looked up. We're adjusting the interview process, not just for skill, also for empathy. Bias testing, pattern evaluation. Good, Vanessa replied. She tapped her pen once against the desk. And add me to the rotation, starting next quarter. Carlos blinked. You want to interview candidates? No, she said. I want to visit the properties. Quietly, randomly, no announcement, just show up. Like I did here. Brent raised an eyebrow. So a secret guest, not secret. Vanessa said, just anonymous. Until I'm not. Carlos gave a low whistle. That's going to make a lot of people nervous. Good, she said, sliding the files into a folder. Let them sit in it. The real version of this job doesn't come with warnings. She stood. Have the new training go live by Friday and include stories, real ones, not scripts. I want the staff to read what people actually experience, not what we wish they did. Brent nodded. Consider it done. Vanessa walked out of the office and back into the lobby. She paused by the front desk. A new agent stood there now, someone she hadn't seen before, young, confident but humble. He smiled as she passed, not out of fear, but with a quiet respect that said, I see you. She nodded back. Everything looked the same on the outside, but she could feel it, the small necessary cracks in old habits. And that's how real change begins, not with a press release, not with a grand gesture, with quiet corrections, repeated until they stick. Vanessa took the elevator back up to the 12th floor. She wasn't rushing. Her flight wouldn't depart until late afternoon. For now, there was still time enough to gather her things and reflect. The hallway smelled faintly of fresh linen and lemon, just like the night before. When she reached her suite, she noticed the door was ajar. Housekeeping must have just finished. She stepped in quietly. Her bag was neatly packed on the bench at the foot of the bed, zippers aligned. Her laptop rested on the desk charger coiled beside it. Nothing was out of place. Except for one thing. A folded note sat on the nightstand. Vanessa approached slowly, picked it up. It wasn't embossed, not in an envelope. Just a lined notepad sheet with careful slanted handwriting. Miss Claiborne, thank you for your grace. I'll be better. Kayla. It wasn't corporate, it wasn't polished, but it meant more than any email from HR ever could. Vanessa folded the note once gently and slipped it into her purse. Downstairs, the lobby had resumed its routine. The doorman from the night before stood by the revolving door, straighter now, more purposeful. He opened the door as she approached. Safe travels, Miss Claiborne, he said warmly. We hope to see you again soon. Vanessa smiled. You will. The car door closed softly behind her. As they pulled away from the curb, she didn't look back. She didn't need to. Because she'd left something behind, something heavier than luggage. She had left the weight of being misjudged, the quiet ache of having to explain her worth in spaces she built. And what replaced it was something far more powerful: understanding, discomfort, growth, not just for them, for her too. She sat quietly in the back seat. The driver didn't speak. The radio remained off, just the soft rhythm of tires and blinkers breaking the silence. Vanessa held Kayla's note in one hand, her purse resting on her lap. She hadn't read it again. She didn't need to. It was there, solid, sincere, small, but enough. Outside the window, brick buildings slid past. Laundromats, bakeries, gas stations with fading paint. This wasn't where she was supposed to be this week, not originally. She had planned to attend the board meeting virtually from New York, but maybe she was meant to be here, not for the business, for the conversation. Because truthfully, none of this surprised her anymore. She wasn't angry that it happened. She was tired of how often worth gets measured by assumptions, tired of how quickly people sort you into boxes based on skin tone, silence, or shoes. Tired of the 1,000 tiny ways dignity has to be earned by people who should never have to ask for it. Yes, this hotel was hers. Yes, she built it. Yes, she belonged there. But even now, even with 17 properties and teams reporting to her, she still had to prove it. And yet, she wasn't bitter. That's what people never understood. Vanessa didn't carry bitterness, she carried memory. And memory, if you wield it right, becomes power. The car curved onto the highway. Airport signs came into view. She thought of her younger self again, that woman answering phones in the middle of the night in borrowed flats. No spotlight, no recognition, just drive, just faith. She had built something no one could take from her, but buildings weren't enough, because even when they bear your name, some people still don't see you. So what do you do when the world refuses to recognize who you are? You make sure you do. You stand taller, you speak plainly, you walk in like the door was always yours. The car pulled up to the terminal. Vanessa stepped out, nodded at the driver, and headed toward the entrance. No more words needed. Inside the airport buzzed like airports always do, announcements echoing, travelers rushing, coffee cups clinking. She moved quietly through it all, almost invisible again. But this time it didn't sting, because something in her had shifted, settled, strengthened. She had taken a moment of public dismissal and turned it into a mirror. For everyone. And mirrors don't lie, they show people who they really are. She hoped Kayla would grow. She hoped Neil would learn. She hoped Brent and Carlos would follow through. But if they didn't, Vanessa would still be standing. She always had been, because dignity wasn't something anyone gave her. It was something she never gave up. And for anyone watching, for anyone listening who had ever been spoken to like they didn't matter, Vanessa had one final thing to say. You don't have to shout to be heard. You just have to know who you are and walk like it. Every single time. Let them be uncomfortable, let them learn, let them wonder how they missed it. And when they finally see you, make sure they never forget. If this story stirred something in you, share it, leave a comment. And remember, real change begins when someone refuses to remain unseen.